remarkable exercise spanning the past 15 years, the last survivors of the Great War were interviewed on film. These are unique stories of courage, sacrifice, and tragedy, told by the men who were there. Now, to commemorate the 90th anniversary of the armistice, these extraordinary interviews have been brought together for the first time. This 6-part series begins in 1914 with the wave of fervent patriotism that accompanied the outbreak of war. It was an euphoria that would soon be shattered, lost in the shell-torn landscapes and water-filled trenches that spanned the Western Front.
More than once you could hear the whiz of a shell going past. Chappie on my right, I was speaking to him about something, and then I turned to this fellow, I turned back again. You're missing. One of those shells, straight at him. He was missing.
It made you never forget it, never, not even to this day. Just to think you shot a man, you know, and do nothing at you. That's how we were on, young and daft.
These are the last voices of the Great War. In the summer of 1914, 3 German armies under the command of Kaiser Wilhelm II marched into Belgium en route for Paris. Belgium's neutrality was guaranteed by Britain, and the Kaiser was given a swift ultimatum to withdraw or face the consequences. When that ultimatum expired, Britain declared war on Germany. Units from Britain's regular army were quickly mobilized for action, and the British Expeditionary Force set sail for France. Public confidence in a swift and decisive victory was high. After all, in 1914, Britain remained a world power. Her Royal Navy was the envy of the world, and the British Empire still spanned a quarter of the globe. The patriotic belief in king and country was often instilled in young men at an early age, and Britain's rich military history meant many were prepared to fight and die for their country. 19-year-old Londoner Richard Hawkins had been an officer cadet at school, brought up to believe in the importance of duty and empire.
This country ruled the British Empire, and the British Empire ruled the world. And it was a very, very different place. I mean, we were the best country in the world, the best everything in the world. We were all very proud of ourselves. And as a young man, it was my duty, and the duty of every young man, to go and defend it against all invaders, and to give it, if necessary, our lives to do it.
If public confidence was high, there were some within the British government who remained more realistic, not least the new Secretary of State for War, Lord Kitchener. Sensing a long and drawn-out conflict, Kitchener appealed for 100,000 new recruits through the now iconic poster, informing every fit and able man in Britain that he was needed by his country. Seeing the opportunity to escape from a mundane job and embark on a daring adventure in France, many thousands rushed to join up. Insurance clerk Robbie Burns from Glasgow was 18 at the outbreak of war, and amongst the first wave of new recruits to answer the call to arms.
Everywhere you went in Glasgow, the great big posters up of Kitchener with his finger pointing at you. No matter where you were, this finger seemed to be pointing at you. Your king and country need you. However, I worked in an insurance office, and now and again, you could hear the piper from the left, right, and I went to the window. I could see probably 200 or 300 men, some with bowler hats and some with what we call skips, that is flat caps. And the pipes always seemed to do something to rouse my enthusiasm. I thought to myself, well, I want to do something like this. I never thought of being killed. Never thought of that. And I thought it'd be good fun killing somebody.
Such was the success of Kitchener's campaign that recruiting stations across the country were quickly swamped with volunteers.
Name?
Kitchener had no trouble in finding the first 100,000. Damaged you couldn't get into the Ruddy Army. There was such a rush to get there, to get on, and defeat the enemy and prevent him from taking over this country.
Are you a British subject? Yes.
It was our duty, nothing out of the ordinary. It's obvious.
But as the ranks of Kitchener's new army began to swell, the patriotic volunteers had no idea of the horrors they were about to witness. After the outbreak of war, the number of new recruits to Kitchener's army rose swiftly. Meanwhile, in Europe, German forces continued their ruthless march towards Paris until on the 23rd of August 1914, they met the advancing British Expeditionary Force at the Belgian town of Mons. After an intense and bloody battle, the overwhelming size of the opposition forced the BEF to retreat. The Germans followed, turning their attention away from the French capital in the hope of destroying the retreating British army. As news of the BEF's gallant retreat reached Britain, the recruitment rate soared again as a new wave of patriotism swept through the country. Idealistic young men like 20-year-old shoe repairer Jack Rogers from London joined up, determined to prevent the Kaiser's forces from reaching England.
Blinking old Kaiser and his son, we used to hate them people, but we certainly wanted to, you know, get out and do our bit because we thought they might be taken over here, you see, and we didn't want that to happen. So we'd do anything that's to fight, of course, and keep them from coming here. And I went up to this place at Shepherd's Bush where we joined on, and they gave me then the choice of, 3 different regiments I could have been in. The third one was the old Sherwood Foresters, the 7th Battalion, and they were called the Robin Hood Rifles. So I fancied that. I thought I'd like to be a Robin Hood Rifle.
Across the country, men were encouraged to enlist with the promise that they would serve alongside friends and work colleagues in so-called PALS battalions. Civic pride meant that towns and cities competed with one another to attract the most new recruits, and new battalions were formed made up of men from the same street, factory or football team. 18-year-old Ted Francis left the paper factory where he worked and joined the 16th Warwickshire Regiment, known as the Birmingham Pals.
You'd have thought that an extra bank holiday had been told in Birmingham because people were excited, laughing, joking. Young people like myself were saying, we'll show those Germans, we'll push them back home. How dare they walk over little Belgium, etc., etc. And we were anxious to get to France, to have a go at them, to push them back into Germany.
Fearing the worst, many parents tried to convince their sons not to enlist, but most young men saw war as an opportunity too good to be missed. In County Durham, 18-year-old farm worker George Littlefair's mother pleaded with him on her deathbed not to join up.
She says, there's a war on now. You know, says I. She says, do not join the army. That was her last words to me. And what did I do? Join the damned army. It it was more or less a novelty to you, you know. Well, we've never been out to England, we've never seen out. We were raw country lads and never seen out. Aye, that was how we felt. We were down long a foul land, I'll tell you.
By the winter of 1914, almost 1 million men had joined Kitchener's army. Meanwhile, across the Channel, it was becoming clear that there would be no swift victory. Both sides had begun to dig defensive positions in the frozen fields of France and Belgium, and a system of fortified trenches emerged, which would eventually spread from the Belgian coast to the Swiss Alps. The age of trench warfare had arrived. At home, new recruits were so plentiful that the army only selected those in A1 physical condition. They were desperate to join the action, but would first have to endure a period of rigorous training to turn them from civilians into soldiers.